Hello everyone, welcome to another video by Minifigs in Space. As many of you already know, I am currently working on a LEGO CGI animation project, and I thought I would do a tutorial on how to animate LEGO minifigures for free using Mechabricks and Blender with a Blender add-on called Epic Fig Rig. I will provide links for everything in the description below, and you will also need a computer mouse. Any type of mouse will do, so you can navigate through Blender and Mechabricks. Without further ado, let's start off by building our minifigure in Mechabricks. For me, I'm going to build a blue spaceman. Here are a couple quick tips to get you started. Using your mouse, the scroll is the zoom, the left button is your pan, and the right button adjusts the, I'm going to call the pivot of the screen. Personally, I do not find Mechabricks to be very intuitive. I find it very time consuming to build in, so I'm going to show you how to select the parts and to change the colors, and then I will skip to the end. I am using a Windows computer, so on a Windows computer, hitting Control and clicking on each part will select all parts together. To change the colors, you'll want to move over to the lower right panel here, and you will find a variety of colors and solid and transparent shades. This is where I will speed things up, but basically there are arrows to move around the objects in 3D space and a snap tool, but it is not drag and drop like Bricklink Studio, which I very much prefer. You will want to save your file to your account if you so desire. And now it's time to move on to the export of the 3D model. There are several file options to choose from, but for the sake of convenience, we are going to stick with Mechabricks file extension for Blender. Speaking of which, you will want to go to the shop and download Blender Lite, a free extension for Blender, to import Mechabrick files. When you're done checking out for this free item, you can find it as a download under your purchases. While you're at it, you'll want to also download the free Epic Fig Rig add-on for Blender from GitHub. And if you haven't already, be sure to download Blender itself. It is a free open source software, and once again you can find links for all of these in the description below. I will do my best to give a basic introduction and overview for Blender, but if you are not familiar with the software, I highly recommend finding an in-depth tutorial that will answer all of your questions. First we have the camera, and this is what you will use to render your images and videos. You can toggle between the camera and the workspace, but we'll go over that more later. Next is the light. This adds the lighting to your scene. Up here in the right hand corner are 4 viewport settings. The first is wireframe, the second is material, the third is shader, and the fourth is the render view. Nearby is also a helpful little toggle button that takes the grid off and on the scene. As for mouse controls, the left hand button is for selection. The right hand button is simply for deselecting or opening up menu options. The scroll button is used for scrolling and also for toggling around the scene. There is your Blender navigational crash course. First things first, select and delete the cube. Next, go to File, Edit, and then click Preferences. You'll see a window pop up like this. Make your way over to the Add-on tab, select the little arrow off to the far right corner, and click Install from Disk. Go to where you saved the Blender add-ons for Mechabricks and Epic Fig Rig. Select your zip files without unzipping them and add them to Blender. Make sure they are enabled by checking the little checkmark box next to your plugins. Select the little hamburger menu in the bottom left corner and save your preferences. Make sure Epic Fig Rig is installed successfully by toggling the menu over in the right hand corner. And there you go, now we are ready to import our minifigure from Mechabricks. Go to File, Import, and then select the very last file that should say Mechabricks. Find your Mechabricks file and import it into Blender. You will probably find that the file has upscaled considerably and the minifigure doesn't look like much, but don't worry, we'll get to that in a moment. In the upper right hand menu, you will see something that says empty. You'll want to select it and delete it. Next, locate your now tiny camera and tiny light and move them off to the side so you can select the minifigure. You will want to select everything, and then go over to the Epic Fig Rig tab in the upper right hand corner and click Rig Selected Minifigure. You should now see all of these fancy controls around the minifigure. Make your way over to the shader editor and you should see all of the decals on the minifigure. Now in order to animate and finish setting up our minifigure, we will want to select the black lines around the minifigure, go from object mode to pose mode, and you should be able to select the lines, and these are controls for moving around your minifigure components. Speaking of which, I just realized I never mentioned the move controls over on the left. First you have the move control with the arrows, then you have a rotate control, and you'll want to use the rotate control to try moving the head. I say try because if you have headgear or hair, sometimes they do not link automatically. In my case, it unexpectedly worked through the automatic process. But the question is, did the air tanks automatically connect to the torso? Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's the case. To undo modifications, simply hit Ctrl Z. To fix the lack of connectivity with the air tanks, we will want to exit pose mode and go back to object mode. You will then want to select the air tanks and then select the torso. The order is very important because, as you may notice, the outlines for the selection are slightly different colors. The lighter orange is the last selection, and this is what the air tanks will connect to. Next, you will want to right-click and select Parent, and then under Parent, select Object. Now go back to Pose mode, and you should be able to have the air tank stay with the torso when you move it. To adjust things like the goggles, I have to go back to Object mode to rotate them, but other than that, I think we are ready to get to the actual animation process. At the bottom of the screen is a collapsed window. You'll want to drag this upwards and you'll see the timeline. The timeline helps tell where the keyframes are for your animation. You will then want to select the black lines again and go back to pose mode. To explain what a keyframe is, it is essentially a snapshot of where you have moved something to. For our first keyframe, we will start with the arm, and you'll notice that there are two selection options. We'll go with this one right here. When you are done moving the arm, you want to go down here and press this button. This automatically records keyframes whenever you move something. However, if you prefer a manual approach, you can simply right-click on what you have just moved and select Insert Keyframe. But for me personally, I will use a combination of both. Press play and move forward in the timeline a few seconds. Move the arm to a new position, and when you replay back the timeline, you should see the arm move. And that, my friends, is pretty much animation in a nutshell. All you have to do is select all the other limbs and adjust the keyframes accordingly. I will note that the trickiest part for animating using the Epic Fig Rig is the walking cycle, and I was stumped for a while because it looked like my minifigure kept gliding around. But what I found out for walking was make sure you insert a keyframe before you even move the minifigure or the leg itself. It will be a little tricky and you will need a lot of patience, but basically keyframe the hips and the legs separate from each other. Blender is a very powerful and free software, but there are a lot of features, so it's kind of hard to keep track of them all. So if you are new to Blender and want to continue learning, I would highly recommend looking up some additional tutorials to familiarize yourself with the software. If you would like a tutorial on how to do some shading and also rendering, please let me know in the comments below and I will see what I can do. I am by no means an expert in rendering, but I'm happy to share what I have learned so far. And that, my friends, brings a close to this tutorial. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this tutorial was informative and that you have learned some things to hopefully animate your own LEGO adventures. Until next time, keep building your universe.